Hey, I'm Karen.
And I'm Deb, and we're answering all your real estate related questions with the same good advice that we would give our best friends. Karen, what's today's question?
Today's question is, what if my house doesn't pass inspection?
So I decided what good is a YouTube channel if I can't address one of my pet peeves, right? Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay. So you know this because every time I hear this phrase, what if my house doesn't pass inspection? My head kind of explodes. And I need to calm down. I need therapy about that for sure. But we're going to use this opportunity to kind of clear that up because in fact, when you're purchasing a home, there is no pass fail on inspections. Now, if you're building a new home, that builder may have city or various county building department people come and do various inspections. And that's when things can pass and fail on a new construction. But that has nothing to do with what you as a buyer are involved with during the home buying process. Do you ever hear anyone say that?
I do. And I know like it doesn't trigger me like it might trigger you, but it's kind of like whatever that agent or that realtor is saying to me or the homeowner is saying to me, I just use the same language. But yeah, I have heard, hey, like I like this house. I'm going this particular loan type. What if it doesn't pass? And then I kind of start talking about it. And I do use the word if it passes or fails.
Pass inspection.
Yeah.
So it is not whether it passes or fails inspection. There is no grade on the inspection report, A, B, C, D, 90%, 80%. There is nothing like that. The question really is the home in an acceptable condition to me? And there's only one person who can decide, or two people, if it's in an acceptable condition to you, and that's you. So that's what the important determination is. The home inspector will never say, didn't pass, big red X. We're going to condemn. That's another one we hear. Oh, the house is going to be condemned. Probably not. But you have to decide whether it's acceptable. Then what happens? So if there is something that is not acceptable to you, what happens? There are two important concepts to understand. And when I explain these concepts, I'm speaking specifically about state of Indiana. Our contracts are done by state. So different areas have different practices. Mm-hmm. They have different definitions. They have different guidelines. There are some states that have a period of time where the buyer can walk away for any reason whatsoever. Indiana is not one of them. We maintain, and I know I've talked about this before, we maintain a Midwestern sensibility of let's see if we can come up with a compromise. Let's see if we can come up with a solution. Let's see if we can come up with a win-win, answer to whatever's coming up. So two concepts that I would want you to understand as you are thinking about my home not passing inspection. So one is, what is wrong with it if there is something wrong? And is that a major defect? Our contracts state that the only time you can eventually get to terminating a contract is if something is a major defect. So that is not a hole in a window screen, not a major defect. A stain on a carpet, not a major defect. Cosmetic things, not typically a major defect. Things that you have seen when you toured the home, not necessarily a major defect. Things that have been disclosed to you before you wrote the offer, not a major defect. So what is a major defect? Should I quiz you, Karen? Do you know?
You can ask me, but I was just thinking maybe that should have been the question of what are major defects? But yeah,
right.
We can, you can quiz me. I don't know. We'll see what I know.
Well, there's two or three ways that our contracts define a major defect.
Okay.
So the first one has to do with the people living inside the home. So is it a health or safety hazard? So that's like a carbon monoxide leak, a giant hole in the floor that someone could fall through and break their leg. Those things are safety hazards. Those are major defects. Another one is if it significantly alters the value of the home. So say, for example, it's built on a construction method that, isn't, this is a hard one for me to explain, but I'm always like, well, if it was like built on an ancient burial ground, maybe we could construe that as a major defect because that could impact the value of the home. And then the other one, the biggest one to me is it something that if not fixed would shorten the lifespan of the home? And I think that's a great question to ask. So that's why I said in the beginning, a hole in a window screen. Is that going to shorten how long that home is going to last?
No,
No. A leak in a roof?
maybe.
Maybe, because it's dripping and water deteriorates
Yeah.
wood and it can impact the trusses and that sort of thing. Water leaking roof could also create a mold situation. So it also meets that test of health and safety hazards. So those are the kinds of things. Stained carpet doesn't really meet any of those standards. So that is a major defect. Those are the things that eventually you could walk away if they bother you. And what's interesting is that in today's market, Karen, I don't know if you've seen this, where, especially last year where things were really competitive. There were people probably you may have seen, I know you don't get too involved in inspections because you're a lender and you're like, la, 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 I don't want to hear.
Right.
But there were probably buyers who accepted things on homes that could meet the test of major defect, but didn't ask the seller to repair them.
That I wouldn't know. I will say during that time frame where maybe, and again, this is just like my gut feeling that maybe people were like, wait a minute, I think I just found a better home on the market. Like, how can I get out of this agreed upon purchase agreement on this other house? And it's like, there are no major defects. Like, you know what I mean? So I didn't hear it on like the example you just gave. I think I may have seen a few where it was the other way. It's like, something better came along the market and I want to jump on that. Like, how can I get out of this contract?
Yeah, not as easy in our state as in other states. So if something is a major defect, it doesn't mean you have to ask the seller to make the repair. Then you determine whether, I know there's a lot of reasons for that. If there were multiple offers, you may be less likely to ask for those repairs. This is when you really rely on, the experts in your team that is around you. I know I just closed on a deal where there were, a few major defects, things that met the test, but weren't super expensive, weren't costing tens and tens of thousands of dollars. So we asked for one thing because we knew there were other offers.
Yeah.
And there could very easily have been a backup offer that we didn't want to rock the boat too much on. So we asked for one thing, everybody's happy, it got done. So what is it a major defect? And then what's interesting to me is that by Indiana contract, if something is not acceptable to you as the buyer, you cannot just walk away. You have to give the seller an opportunity to make the repair. And the seller may say, no, I'm not going to, or no, I can't afford to. And then that's fine. And then the deal can terminate. But you cannot just, and I see this a lot, you have the home inspection and then you're like, oh, nope, that furnace is old, still works as intended, works safely. Not a major defect, doesn't meet that test. An old furnace doesn't meet the test of a major defect, but they want to walk away because the furnace is old. Right. There's a very good chance you're going to lose your earnest money. If it's my seller, you're going to lose your earnest money because I feel really strongly about what the contract says. And I always have this conversation with buyers before we even get there, that you have to give the seller a chance. Now, as the buyer, you kind of control that conversation a little bit with how you want the repair done. So, you're not like you're saying, oh, I'm going to trust the seller to fix it, hope they fix it correctly. You have some control over how that's done.
Right.
So you're not giving up complete control when we say you have to give the seller a chance to make the repair.
But like the buyer can say, hey, seller, if you agree to make such repair, I would like to find the contractor or whomever to make the repair. Something like that.
A lot of times we say, they've got to be a qualified contractor who's got experience making those kinds of repairs.
Yeah.
In our county, there's not a lot of licensing. In other counties, there's more licensing. Like I think in Marion County, up in the Indianapolis area, you have to be licensed to be a roofer. Yeah. We don't have that licensing down here. So you can't say licensed contractor necessarily. HVAC, plumbing, electric, you have to be licensed, but you also have the right to review receipts and you have the right to reinspect. So you don't just have to accept, whatever the seller wants to do as a repair. You have a voice in how that repair gets done. So you do have control. So this is the important thing that I want to say. So is it a major defect? If it's a major defect, can you live with it? Can you not? And if you cannot, you have to give the seller a chance. So very different than just pass or fail, I lose the house. It's not like that at all.
Right. And then I think too, on the lending piece of it, if I can just throw this in here, I mean, we're not going to be looking at that home inspection. I mean, not at least where I work. So if the, it's not just that, yeah. So if the appraisal report isn't mentioning anything in there, I think we've talked about this before, but if the appraiser does not mention things that they see visible that might require further inspection, I don't know why I'm doing that, but inspection, or we can pull pieces out of the home inspection. But typically, as far as the loan that we are doing for a borrower, if the home inspection is not required, we don't need to see it. If the appraisal report does not indicate anything, we don't need to see anything either. So like you said, if that buyer can accept the findings, and I think that's how I word some of my, are you comfortable with the findings of your home inspection? Yeah. Can I proceed with the appraisal type of thing and get that ordered? Then we can move forward. I mean, there are property standard conditions that certain loans require, but again, that's going to fall back to the lender's appraisal. And if the appraisal isn't indicating anything, then there's that. So,
I think this is a good time to throw in. No one requires you to do an inspection. Your lender may have, depending on your loan type, may have some requirements by the appraiser. And I know we've talked about that before, but there is no requirement by anyone to do an inspection. I always kind of have jokingly say, but I'll judge you if you don't. So you really need to, but there is no requirement to do that. So again, nothing gets reported back to the city. That's another thing I hear a lot. Like, well, that doesn't meet code. Well, we're really looking at what was code when the home was built, not necessarily what today's codes are, but the home inspector is not going back to the city and again, reporting something for like, oh, they got a bed in that room and there's no window. So it's, doesn't meet code or whatever it is. They're very separate or very compartmentalized in our processes. So the inspection in that process is very compartmentalized and separate from the lending aspect and the insurance aspect and the city building code, and all that stuff. So
I think it's this is a great conversation to be having, because this also will let sellers know that it's really, just because a buyer might be getting financing through a particular loan that, like, let's say FHA or USDA or VA, that might require some additional property standard, doesn't necessarily mean it won't be, a good offer to accept, because the house could be fine, and it won't, it's going to pass the inspection. So that would be the one time I would say you're allowed to say that. Did it pass the FHA inspection, or did the appraiser note some peeling paint or something that needed to be addressed? Which I had last week on a house on a listing that it was an FHA. There was some peeling paint on the outside foundation. You just had to go and get it painted, and it was all good. Get that done.
So please do me a favor. Don't say, what if the house doesn't pass inspection? Say, what if I find things that are not acceptable to me? Then what do we do?
There you go.
And we strategize from there.
You trust your best friends to give you good advice.
So consider us your best friends in real estate. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.